friends, a big warm welcome to our very own channel, Ammu&You, where I'm Ammu and I'm here with another beautiful story to narrate to you. The name of the story today is B.Wordsworth, written by V.S.Naipaul. Three beggars called punctually every day at the hospitable houses in Middle Street. At about 10, an Indian came in his dhoti and white jacket, and we poured a tin of rice into the sack he carried on his back. At 12, an old woman smoking a pipe came, and she got a cent. At 2, a blind man led by a boy called for his penny. Sometimes we had a rogue. One day a man called and said he was hungry. We gave him a meal. He asked for a cigarette and wouldn't go until we had lit it for him. That man never came back again. The strangest caller came one afternoon at about 4 o'clock. I had come back from school and was in my home clothes. The man said to me, "Sonny, may I come inside your yard?" No one had asked this before. He was a small man and he was tidily dressed. He wore a hat, a white shirt and black trousers. I asked, "What do you want?" He said, "I want to watch your bees." We had 4 small gru-gru palm trees and they were full of uninvited bees. I ran up the steps and shouted, "Ma, it have a man outside here. He say he want to watch the bees." My mother came out, looked at the man and asked in an unfriendly way, "What you want?" The man said, "I want to watch your bees." His English was good. It didn't sound natural and I could see my mother was worried. She said to me, "Stay here and watch him while he watched the bees." The man said, "Thank you, madam. You have done a good deed today." He spoke very slowly and very correctly, as though every word was costing him money. We watched the bees, this man and I, for about an hour, squatting near the palm trees. The man said, "I like watching bees. Sonny, do you like watching bees?" I said, "I aren't have the time." He shook his head sadly. He said, "That's what I do. I just watch. I can watch ants for days. Have you ever watched ants? And scorpions and centipedes? Have you watched any of these?" I shook my head. I said, "What you does do, master?" I had asked him out of curiosity. He got up and said, "I am a poet." "A good poet?" I asked. He said, "The greatest in the world." "What your name, mister?" "B. Wordsworth. B for Bill, black Wordsworth. White Wordsworth was my brother. We share one heart. I can watch a small flower like the morning glory and cry." I said, "Why you does cry?" "Why, boy, why? You will know when you grow up. You're a poet too, you know, and when you're a poet, you can cry for everything." I couldn't laugh. He said, "You like your mother? When she not beating me?" He pulled out a printed sheet from his hip pocket and said, "On this paper is the greatest poem about mothers, and I'm going to sell it to you at a bargain price for 4 cents. I went inside and I said, "Ma, you want to buy a poetry for 4 cents? My mother said, "Tell that blasted man to haul his tail away from my yard. You hear that?" I said to B. Wordsworth, "My mother says she can't have 4 cents. B. Wordsworth said, "It's the poet's tragedy." And he put the paper back in his pocket. He didn't seem to mind. I said, "It's a funny way to go around selling poetry like that. Only Calypsonians do that sort of thing. A lot of people does buy?" He said, "No one has yet bought a single copy." "But why you does keep on going around then?" He said, "In this way I watch many things and I always hope to meet poets." I said, "You really think I is a poet?" "You're as good as me," he said. "And when B. Wordsworth left, I prayed I would see him again. About a week later, coming back from school one afternoon, I met him at the corner of Middle Street. He said, I've been waiting for you for a long time. I said, you sell any poetry yet? He shook his head. He said, in my yard I have the best mango tree in Port of Spain. And now the mangoes are ripe and red and very sweet and juicy. I have waited here for you to tell you this and to invite you to come and eat some of my mangoes. He lived in Alberto Street in a one-roomed hut placed right in the center of the lot. The yard seemed all green. There was the big mango tree. There was a coconut tree and there was a plum tree. The place looked wild, as though it wasn't in the city at all. You couldn't see all the big concrete houses in the street. He was right. The mangoes were sweet and juicy. I ate about 6, and the yellow mango juice ran down my arms to my elbows and down my mouth to my chin, and my shirt was stained. My mother said when I got home, where you was? You think you is a man now and could go all over the place? Go, cut a whip for me. She beat me rather badly, and I ran out of the house swearing that I would never come back. I went to B.Wordsworth's house. I was so angry, my nose was bleeding. B.Wordsworth said, stop crying and we will go for a walk. I stopped crying, but I was breathing short. We went for a walk. We walked down St. Clair Avenue to the savannah, and we walked to the racecourse. B.Wordsworth said, now let us lie on the grass and look up at the sky. And I want you to think how far those stars are from us. I did as he told me, and I saw what he meant. I felt like nothing. And at the same time, I had never felt so big and great in all my life. I forgot all my anger and all my tears and all the blows. When I said I was better, he began telling me the names of the stars, and I particularly remembered the constellation of the Orion the Hunter. Though I don't really know why. I can spot Orion even today, but I have forgotten the rest. Then a light was flashed in our faces, and we saw a policeman. We got up from the grass. The policeman said, what you doing here? B. Wordsworth said, I've been asking myself the same question for years. 40 years to be precise. We became friends, B. Wordsworth and I. He told me, you must never tell anybody about me and about the mango tree and the coconut tree and the plum tree. You must keep that a secret. If you tell anybody, I will know because I am a poet. I gave him my word and I kept it. I liked his little room. It had no more furniture than George's front room, but it looked cleaner and healthier, but it also looked lonely. One day I asked him, Mr. Wordsworth, why you does keep all this bush in your yard? Aren't it does make the place damp? He said, listen and I will tell you a story. Once upon a time, a boy and girl met each other and they fell in love. They loved each other so much, they got married. They were both poets. He loved words. She loved grass and flowers and trees. They lived happily in a single room. And then one day, the girl poet said to the boy poet, we are going to have another poet in the family. But this poet was never born because the girl died and the young poet died with her, inside her. And the girl's husband was very sad. And he said he would never touch a thing in the girl's garden. And so the garden remained and grew high and wide. I looked at B. Wordsworth, and as he told me this lovely story, he seemed to grow older. I understood his story. We went for long walks together. We went to the botanical gardens and the rock gardens. We climbed Chancellor Hill in the late afternoon and watched the darkness fall on Port of Spain and watched the lights go on in the city and on in the ships. in the harbor. He did everything as though he were doing it for the first time in his life. He did everything as though he were doing some church rite. He would say to me, "Now, how about having some ice cream?" And when I said yes, he would grow very serious and say, "Now, which cafe shall we patronize?" As though it were a very important thing. He would think for some time about it and finally say, "I think I will go and negotiate the purchase with that shop." The world became a most exciting place. One day, when I was in his yard, he said to me, "I have a great secret, which I'm now going to tell you." I said, "It really secret?" At the moment, yes. I looked at him, and he looked at me. He said, "This is just between you and me. Remember, I am writing a poem." Oh, I was disappointed. He said, "But this is a different sort of poem. This is the greatest poem in the world." I whistled. He said, "I've been working on it for more than 5 years now. I will finish it in about 22 years from now. That is, if I keep on writing at the present rate." "You does write a lot then?" He said. "Not anymore. I just write one line a month. But I make sure it is a good line." What was last month's good line? "The past is deep." It is a beautiful line, I said. B.Wordsworth said, "I hope to distill the experiences of a whole month into that single line of poetry. So in 22 years, I shall have written a poem that will sing to all humanity." I was filled with wonder. Our walks continued. "One day," I said, "Mr. Wordsworth, if I drop this pin in the water, you think it will float?" "This is a strange world. Drop your pin and let us see what will happen." The pin sang. I said, "How is the poem this month?" He merely said, "Oh, it comes, it comes." But the greatest poem in the world I heard no more. I felt he was growing older. "How you does live, Mr. Wordsworth?" I asked him one day. He said, "You mean how I get money?" When I nodded, he laughed and said, "I sing calypsos in the calypso season, and that lasts you the rest of the year. It is enough. But you will be the richest man in the world when you write the greatest poem." He didn't reply. One day when I went to see him in his little house, I found him lying on his little bed. He looked so old. The poem is not going well. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through the window at the coconut tree. "When I was 20, he said, "I felt the power within myself. Then almost in front of my eyes, I could see his face growing older and more tired. But that was a long, long time ago. And then I felt it so keenly. It was as though I had been slapped by my mother. I could see it clearly on his face. Death on the shrinking face. He looked at me and saw my tears and sat up. "Come." I went and sat on his knees. He looked into my eyes and he said, "Oh, you can see it? Too? I always knew you had the poet's eyes." He didn't even look sad, and that made me burst out crying loudly. He pulled me to his thin chest and said, "Do you want me to tell you a funny story?" I couldn't reply. He said, "When I have finished the story, I want you to promise that you will go away and never come back to see me. Do you promise?" I nodded. "Good. Well, listen. That story I told you about the boy poet and the girl poet, that wasn't true. It was something I just made up. All this talk about poetry and the greatest poem in the world, all of that is not true either. Isn't that the funniest thing you have heard?" But his voice broke. I left the house and ran home crying, like a poet, for everything I saw. I walked along Alberto Street a year later, but I could find no sign of the poet's house. It hadn't vanished just like that. It had been pulled down, and a big two-storied building had taken its place. The mango tree, the plum tree, and the coconut tree had all been cut down, and there was brick and concrete everywhere. It was just as though B.Wordsworth never existed. Great men, different men. I hope you've loved the story. I would love to get your comments on this. Your comments always make me very happy. Thank you for listening to the story. I will come back soon with another story. Meanwhile, I hope you will like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And thank you. Take care. Bye bye.